Hey everyone, this is Mark from Wiki Design. In this video, I'm going to show you how to animate an image like this across the screen just using CSS. As you can see here, it's almost Halloween time as of recording this, so I'm going to do something a little fun, and I wanted to have a ghost animate across a screen like this and have it kind of float in and out. So that's why I wanted to make this video, because I want to show you how easy it is to actually do this just with CSS. I'm going to break this video out into 3 different sections. The first section is I'm going to show you how to set everything up and how to do just a simple animation across the screen. The second section is I'm going to show you how you can do a more complex animation, kind of like what's going on right here, where the ghost is coming in and out at different times, different scales. You can see right here he's scaling up. So I'm going to show you how to do something a little more complex in the second part. And then the third part is, you see this button right here? I'm going to actually show you how to create this JavaScript button. This is going to give the user the ability to turn on and off the animation, because sometimes the animations could be a bit much for users, so you want to give them an option to turn it off. So I'm going to show you how to create that button just using some simple JavaScript. Now, you ready for the good news? You could do all of this with the free version of Elementor. So while I am going to be using Elementor Pro for certain sections of this, you can just pull this off using the free version of Elementor. So I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's get started. The first step we need to do is download or create the image that you want to animate across the screen. So in this case, I have this little ghost right here I got from Icon Scout, I believe it was. So you can download an image or you can create whatever you need for your use case. Just download it, and you want to make sure that it is a PNG. So in this case, you can see this is a PNG ghost, and I kept the pixels around 200 by 200. So if you right click right here, you can see I have it at 200 by 200. I do recommend having the image at the scale that you want rather than relying on CSS to scaling down or really scaling up, because in that case you could have some issues with performance or pixelation. So what I would do is whatever you know it's going to be at scale 1, basically at 100%, just make that your dimension. So in this case, I don't think I want to go much bigger than 200 by 200. So this was a good case right here. So once you do that, you just upload it into your media library just like this. The next step is to grab your image and actually just pull it into Elementor. So I just had this image widget and just pulled it to the top of this section right here. So I do recommend adding this image to the top of the page just so you can kind of see it when you're in the editor here. But now I'm going to take the CSS code and I'm actually going to force it up here. So it really doesn't matter where you put on the page, but I found it's just easier. And you can see right here, I have my navigator open. So in this first section, I just have a hero and just a column, and I just have this sitting above here. The next step is we need to declare a CSS ID and class. So in this case, I'm keeping the ID at ghost animation, and then I'm just keeping the class at ghost. So whatever is going to fit your website, just put in your custom ID and CSS class right here. Like I said in the beginning of the tutorial, you do not need Elementor Pro to pull this off. But I am going to use it because I love this section right here. So if you go under Page Settings Advanced, you can add in your own CSS just for this page. So if you are using the free version, you can drop this code that we're going to be talking about in the tutorial in your customizer or anywhere that you add your CSS. Since you just declared a class and an ID, you can add this pretty much anywhere. But I like just having it on the front end of the website right here, because if you have Pro, when you add, you can see right here, I added the CSS code. You could see it change on the page in real time. So that's why I like to use it right here. Okay, so now I dropped in this code right here. So the first thing you need to do is call the class. So if you remember, we just called it ghost. And then these parameters right here is going to make sure that it selects everything with that tag or that CSS selected. So this is really good to have this in here. So we might change some of these values later. So in this very first line, this is animation, and then we need to call it something. So in this case, I'm just going to call it fly. We're going to reference this in the next section when we start to add the keyframes. And then this next line is how long is it going to take for the ghost to do the whole animation. So this is 20 seconds right here. Let's go ahead and just make it pretty quick. Let's 5 seconds. And then linear just means the animation is going to go from one side to the other without any like transitions or easing in and out. I think in this case, this is going to be fine. And then this right here is infinite. So this is just going to continuously loop forever. If for some reason you only want them to float around the screen twice or something, you could just type in 2. So any value you put in here is just how many times it's going to loop around. So what we needed to do with the CSS code is, instead of having it inside the website, we need to use this CSS code to force it to the top left of the browser. And then what we're going to do is use keyframes to then pull this ghost anywhere we want. So what we do is we declare it with a top and left of 0, position fixed. So what that means is you're forcing the CSS class of ghost to be fixed always in the corner. Let me show you what fixed position means so you can get a better idea. So I hit update, and here we are on the front end of the website. And you can see right now he's not doing anything. He's not moving around. We haven't declared any keyframes, so he's just going to sit here. So this right here is he's sitting in the top left corner of the browser at 0 pixels, 0 pixels. So it's always right here, and that's what fixed means. So if I scroll down, you can see he's just fixed to the screen. The next thing we can add in the CSS is a z-index. So when you have a really large number like this, like 999, this means that it's going to float above everything else on the website. So as long as none of these other elements on the website are above 999, he's always going to float above it. So if you do want to declare, let's say, this to be a higher value, you can do that right here, go under Style, and then z-index. So if you want to have it where the ghost floats behind the text, you just put a z-index higher than 999 here. But in most cases, unless you declare CSS z-indexes, it's 999 is going to be like the top. So that's what we want in this case. We want him just floating around everywhere above everything on the website. And this next line of CSS is optional, but in this case, I didn't want to have it where the cursor would change or anything like that. So I just added this right here called pointer events none. So this will mean that it's not going to receive any hover links, or it's not going to change the cursor at all. So in this case, I just wanted it where the user can't do anything to the ghost. He's just kind of floating. Now that we have him floating here, we can add the following CSS code, and it's going to automatically start to animate. I'm going to walk you through what each of these things mean and how you can even add more animation if you want. So you can see right here, that simple animation. Let me go to full screen. You can see he's just kind of floating left and right. So this is the first section of the tutorial. I'm just going to show you how to do one simple movement like that. So to pull that off, you just need to add keyframes, fly, which if you remember right up here, we need to declare a name for the animation. So in this case, I just have it called fly. And then the way it works with keyframes is it's kind of like a timeline. If you're used to using like video editing or something along those lines, it goes from 0 to 100%. So the ghost starts at 0 and then ends at 100%. And it takes them 5 seconds to do this sequence of animation, if that makes sense. Let me show you exactly what these little lines of code mean and where you can actually get more information. So before I continue, if you go over to this website right here, this is a really good resource, learning about the CSS transform property. And if you go down here to the property values, they have a lot of information on all the different things that you can do to your animations using the transform tool. In this case, we're just going to move the ghost from left to right, basically. And as you can see, you can also scale it. You can do 3D stuff. You can rotate. You can do tons of different things. Skew, perspective. Like I said, this one is just going to be very simple. So let's go back into this code. Like I said, if you want to actually learn more about it, you can click this button right here, hit play it, and then they're actually going to show you if you add the code so you can visually kind of see what does it mean when you go 100 pixels, 100 pixels. You could see what that does. So this is a really good resource. I recommend bookmarking this because I reference back to this all the time because this is actually pretty complicated stuff once you start to get to different perspectives and angles and skews. It can get a little complicated. So let's go back into here and let me go ahead and actually just remove this 50% so you can see that it's not going to do anything. That's because the ghost right now is off the screen. So let's go back into here and let me remove this 100% as well. So as you can see, you can just have it looping from 0% to 0%. So it goes every 5 seconds. It's just going to do this little animation. But let's go ahead and let me type in some values here so you can see what the heck is going on. And let me change this opacity to 1. What I recommend when you animate an object like this across the screen is to either use percentages, or in this case, I want to teach you about viewport units. So the way it works is if you look right here, this is considered a viewport. Let me go into like full screen mode. So viewport mode basically means the size of the browser width and the height. So this is going to be useful because if you try to animate this guy with pixels, you're going to run into a lot of issues once you start to scale down the website, and it's just going to get a lot messier, and you're going to open up a lot of can of worms, and it's going to be hard to get out of it once you start using pixels. So in these examples, I'm only going to be using percentages, and I'll leave a link to this right here if you can learn more about it. So with viewport width, you can see right here, in most cases, we're going to want to have them go from one side to the other. So that would be 100 VWs or viewport width. And then same thing goes for VH. So you could do the height of the browser. And same thing, 100 would mean it kind of just goes off the screen. So you can see in this case, if you just said 10 VH, that will resolve to 10% of the current viewport height. So if you only did it 10% or 10 VW, it will only go down like right here. So I'm going to play around with these values, but I wanted to show you this just so you can kind of understand what these numbers mean before we start touching the code. So let's go ahead and just start adding some values here so you can visually see what's going on inside the browser. So in this case, we want to do the X coordinate. So let's do VW, so 10 VWs. So you can see right here, he's already starting to move. That's pretty cool. So what it's doing is it's going 10% of the view width of the browser. So that's right around here. Let's go ahead and change that to 50. So he should go to the middle of the page and then come back. And there you see. And there you go. You can see he started from the middle and going back. Now, if we wanted to have him go down, we can go 50 and then VH. So you can see in this example, he's starting at the middle of the screen basically. So 50% of the view width and the height. So he starts here and then he always wants to go back to 0, 0. So the goal is to always kind of go back to your starting point. So that's why in most cases, you're going to want to have your 0% and your 100% of your keyframes always start and finish at the same time. Now I'm going to add the code that I showed you before so you can better understand how I was able to make it go from here to here. So like I said, you got right here, 0% and 100%. I have them start at the same spot. So he's starting at 0, and I just have him starting way down here at 110 view height. So he's actually going off the page. So you can always do values over 100. So in this case, it was 110. So that means he will clearly go off the screen. Because if I go here and I just type in 100, you might not see him go off the screen completely. So it kind of kills the effect. Let me go into here. And you can kind of see the top of his head. Right here, let me where my mouse is, you're going to see his head's never going to leave the screen really. So that's why you can add a little more buffer room and just have 110 VH. And now let's make sure everything's working right here. You're not going to see his head. See how you weren't able to see his head right there? That's because we declared it to be a little bit more. So as you can see here, you can also declare other CSS variables. So in this case, we have them starting at 50% opacity, and then he goes into regular opacity, which is 1, and then back down to 50. So he kind of fades in and out. So you can see right here, you could see since he's a ghost, he can be transparent, which is cool. So if we just went in here and changed these to 1, you're going to see that he doesn't do anything. He always just stays solid. See how you can't see through him? That's because we took the opacity off. So that's what's really cool about the CSS animations. You could be really creative with it, and you could do tons of different things. And this is only scratching the surface of all the different things you can do. You can do like blurs and all these different things. So in this case, like I said, this is the very first part of the section where I just wanted to kind of get you comfortable with how keyframes work and how you can easily add in these different values and see how easy it is to move them around the screen. Now I'm going to paste in a more advanced animation so you can see all the fun stuff you can do with it. So I'm going to paste this in right here. And let's kind of go through and just watch what he's going to do. So he's rotating, scaling there, a little bit of a delay. He's coming in right here at an angle, kind of rotating, comes in quickly. And then this is one of my favorite parts right up here. So he's going to scale up. You can see I have him scaling up the screen while he's floating up and then coming right back down. So that's really simple actually. So you already know how to do the translate, which like I said, we're just using percentages. And in this case, we're using viewport height. We have some widths here. So you can see right here that I usually have them going pretty far off the screen. So we got 120 view width, and you know, he's going off the screen a lot more than he was in the original example. And you can also use percentages as well. So if you go right here, you can see I added some extra ones. So this one is called rotate and then 0 degrees. Like I said, you go back to this website and they have this right here, rotate. And if you go right here, you can see these are all the different angles, of course. So it's pretty simple to understand. You go 180, 50, 45. You could do pretty much any angle, any mathematical angle you could put in CSS. So you can see I have it going throughout the whole thing where he's doing 0 here, rotates 20 degrees, goes negative 20. So I kind of just plug in different values, see if I like it, and then just, just trial and error basically. So if you remember in the first example, I only had 3 different keyframes. We had 0, 50%, and 100. And so you could declare any percentage. There's really no limitation. So in this case, I went every like 12.5%. So you can see 12.5, 25, 37.5. I usually like to keep them like equal numbers. I usually don't like to have them so separate out because it makes it a lot harder to try to control your animation if you have it where it's like 0, 25, then you have like 30, 40, 50. You know what I'm saying? So just keep it consistent. You're going to save yourself a big headache. Okay, so let me scroll this over a little bit so you can see a little bit better. And just like in the first step, I have some opacities here. So I just have it at 1. I changed it to 0.5 here, 0.25. I kind of just played around until I got something I liked. And you can see the other thing right here. We have the scale at 1.75. So this is a really cool thing right here. So if we go back into here, we go to scale. Of course, you can do scale 1.5. You could do one value. I like to scale the whole thing up at once. So if you have a reason to only scale it at like the X coordinates rather than the Y, you can do that right here. But if you just put in one value, so if you just put in scale 2, for example, it would just scale it twice as much. So that's what I did here. I just did a scale of 1.75. So toward the end of the animation, he scales up the screen 1.75 right here. That's at 1.75. And then he kind of scales back down to regular 1. So like I said, you could play around and do any of these other variables you can add to your transform CSS code. So if you really wanted to get creative, you can start to skew things in different perspectives. Yeah, there's literally no end to what you can do when it comes to the animations. The hardest thing I found is trying to control these things in a visual aspect. So what I mean is if you want him to like go off the screen at a certain angle, but you don't know what keyframe, like right now, I'm not quite sure what keyframe that is. So here's a little trick that I found out. What you can do is just add a bunch of background image colors to your keyframe so you can kind of visually see where the ghost is in real time. So let me show you an example. So if I type in background / color red or something, see right here, the background of that keyframe is at red. So if I just take this value and just add a whole bunch of them, change out these colors, you're going to be able to visually see where that ghost is in real time rather than trying to guess. So here we are. I went ahead and sped up the animation a little bit and I added a background color to all of the keyframes. So like I said, this is a really useful tip if you are having a hard time figuring out where your ghost is on the screen and at what percentage he's at. So you can see right here, that's like a lime green color, red to purple, so that's in between animations. And what's really good about this is if you look down here, once you get to this section right here, you're going to be able to see the top of the ghost kind of turning right here and then going back up. So the background image can also kind of show you where he is. Even if he's a little bit off the screen, you can see the edge of the background. So definitely a little CSS hack that I learned along the way that I find very useful. So now that you understand it, you can make a really complex animation. Let's go ahead and let me show you how you can add this JavaScript button to toggle on and off the animation. The way we're going to pull off this button is by just clicking and dragging in the HTML widget. As you can see right here, I have this little widget right here. And I added some spacing just on the bottom just for visual effect. So what you need to do is paste in this code right here. So of course, I'm going to have all of these CSS codes and the JavaScript code in the description below. And if you remember the very first step, we went in and we assigned an ID to the ghost image or whatever image you're going to use. So that's what we need to target with this JavaScript. So in this case, I just called it ghost animation. So if we just go back into our HTML widget, you really only have to change 1 or 2 different things in here and everything else is just going to work by itself. So what you need to do is just change this ID right here to whatever you called it. So there we go. We got ghost animation. This is just using regular JavaScript to get a element by ID. You just need to declare an ID to an element and then the JavaScript can target that element. So we just called it ghost animation. And then if you look right here, this is the name of the buttons right here. So we have hide ghost and play ghost. So as you can see, you can just change hide ghost to whatever you need to have and then play ghost. And then you need to add the button for hide again. And this code's really lightweight. It's just adding a regular input button to your website. And so you can style this up. If you use an Elementor Pro, you would go into your site settings and style up your button there. Or in this case, you could just declare, I have, like I said, Pro, you can just have a simple input. I have the background color, the orange, font size, outline 0. Very simple CSS styling to make these buttons look the way you want. I'm a big fan of JavaScript like this, where it's very lightweight and doesn't add much bloat to your website. So if we go ahead, hit update on the page, let's make sure that everything's working on the front end of the website. So we have the ghost flying around right here, and you can see right here when you click that button, turns them off, and it will restart the animation completely. So we can hit play, hide. Yeah, works out good. Now, one thing I did not mention before is this is going to work fine on mobile as well. So if you scroll down the web page on a mobile device, the ghost is going to do the same exact thing. That's why I don't recommend using pixels, because if you started using pixels here, it would be a mess. He would be flying all at different speeds and everything. So that's why it's really good to just use percentages and the viewport width and height. So you can see while you're scrolling down the page on mobile that he works fine. I do recommend checking this out on a couple different mobile devices. And if you start to see a performance issue with scrolling, that could just be that you're using a large image or your animation is just too complex. So if you start to notice some lag, you could just go ahead and just disable that completely. You could always just go into here, responsive, and then you can just turn it off on mobile. And that's it for this video. Make sure you give it a thumbs up, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and hit that bell to receive notifications when I release new Elementor tutorials like this. Again, this is Mark from Wiki Design.